What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now, listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mershazde, and boy, do I have a special guest. It's me today. I'm doing my solo, so we're flying solo here, and I want to talk to you about something. This is a concept that came up in one of my mentoring calls with my mentor, Warren Rusting, and I've been working with him now for a few months, and we were talking about the concept of power versus influence. And so when I talk about power versus influence, there's another quote that I had another mentor of mine say, and his name is Vern Harnish. And it was the first time I ever heard this. He says, you can be rich or you can be king. And it's kind of the same idea of power versus influence, rich versus king. And, I've seen this a lot in my life, especially with entrepreneurs, business people. They start a business in their garage. They build a business from the ground up. We start a career. We start small. We grow, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We make it into something, and we go, oh, I'm in control of this thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm running my business. It's mine. 100% ownership. I get to call all the shots. I get to make all the decisions. And we become this big fish in a small pond, right? And what I've noticed with most entrepreneurs I know is the size of that pond varies from person to person, but it usually is not as big as they're probably capable of swimming in. But they become the biggest fish in the smallest pond or in a small pond, and they have power. They get this level of power and they go, I'm good. I get to call the shots. I'm the king of the castle. I'm the queen of the castle. I get to make all the decisions. I'm good. I have this team under me and they're doing what I want them to do. And as Vern says, you can be rich or you can be king, and they want to be king, queen. They want to own it. They want to make the call. They want to make the decision. And Warren and I were talking about this because he had brought something up to me that I thought was really interesting. And we were talking about this ability to actually make a choice. And his position on this was, you have a choice, Darius, that you can have power or you can have influence. But you got to decide each, because power is very important. Power is around making the final call. I get to make that call. I get to make that decision. And for myself, I've found in life that I have these moments where I'm rubbing up against like power, and I'm like, man, I want to make the call. I want the power. But he said something that was really interesting to me. He said, you have a choice of whether you want power or influence, and the difference between the two is really simple. With power, you get to make the final call. With influence, it's around creating a bigger impact. And many times we don't have the power to make that bigger impact. Why? Because we're going to need to rely on people maybe who have more power than us in order to create a bigger outcome. And I thought that was really interesting because in my life, I've always gone for bigger outcomes. And that means I got to influence in many ways. I got to influence my partners because I can't do it by myself. I got to influence my team. Why? Because I can't do it by myself. And generally speaking, the bigger I play, the more I have to influence people who probably have more power than I have to do the things I need them to do for me to make the bigger impact. And I thought it was really fascinating that there's this kind of line in the sand where some people don't have it. If you're talking about maybe an Elon Musk or, some of the most powerful people in the world, they have both. It's a gift. They get both power and influence. But that's not necessarily the case for most people. Most people, I think it's as we're playing the game of life, we have to make a choice of, do I want power or do I want influence? And if we choose power, then I think it's really kind of simple. It's like, okay, we'll go figure out the biggest pond you can play in without having to, influence people more powerful than you. Or if you do, it's only to a certain degree because you don't want to give up power to maybe get that bigger influence. And you're done. You just play the game. You're king or queen of the castle. You got to control the outcomes. It's your call. You're done. Nothing else to do. But if you decide to go down the other road, which is like, hey, I'm making a choice that I actually want maximum influence, then as Warren and I were talking about, what he says is that is the higher level of leadership. Because what that requires is putting your ego aside for a second and realizing that, oh, I need to influence those around me. And maybe I don't have the power to have them do what I want. Maybe I need to just talk to them in a way, I got to meet them where they're at, as my other mentor, Rand Stagan, says. I got to meet them where I'm at. I got to be a conscious leader. I got to meet them where they're at and help them feel safe and heard and seen. And from that, I might be able to influence the ability to create that bigger outcome that is beneficiary for both of us, because it's always got to be win-win, especially if I'm trying to influence others, by having them trust that I'm a partner that can help them get what they need. And that is really the power of influence. And if you start to think about your own life or your career or the things you're trying to create impact in, and really ask yourself the question of like, hey, who is the one or two people I need to enroll? And let's just use the example of an executive team. Let's say you're trying to play bigger. I used to, when I would coach entrepreneurs, I would tell them, I'd say, look, if you're trying to play bigger, you need to go hire folks that have done things you have not yet done, convince them to leave a place that's probably safer than where you're at, and influence them to come and join what you're doing to create a bigger outcome. Why? Because when or if you're able to do that, and that requires money, that requires stability, that requires selling people on a vision, influencing them to be a part of something greater than themselves. It's hard to do that with folks that have a lot of options. So what you have to build is something that's so interesting that it influences their decision to come be a part of it. Now, it does a couple of things. Number one is you now have intellectual capital and influence from someone that's been there and done that thing you're trying to do that you haven't yet done. And they bring that into your organization and they can affect that change. Because right away, you're going to see something. They're going to be like, oh, you guys do it that way. This is how the big players do it. And they're going to bring the best practices for folks that have done something bigger than you have at bigger scale with bigger impact. And they're going to say, that's the plan. I've already done that before. 5 times, 10 times, 20 times the size you're trying to do it, 2 times the size you're trying to do it. And I always used to tell entrepreneurs and CEOs, I'd say, look, you don't want someone too big. I don't want to have like a 2-person coffee shop and go hire the CEO of Starbucks. That's not going to be very helpful because they're going to be like, hey, I don't remember. I never did this as a startup. But maybe I'll go, if I have a 10-shop coffee shop, maybe I'll go get someone that ran a 30-person coffee shop who was the head of operations for it, or a 50-person coffee shop, and bring them over to my 10-person and say, hey, I want to grow to 50. Can you get me there? And I have another friend of mine. We were talking about this, and he said, as you double in size as an organization, typically a lot of your leaders won't make it because they haven't yet grown something as big as you are at that time or bigger. So you have to have that ability to influence others to come into your organization, especially as a business person, especially as an entrepreneur. And this can be in anything, even if you're not the entrepreneur, if you're just someone in your job, you're an executive, you're on a nonprofit, you're trying to create some outsized impact in the things you care about. This is going to happen by getting leverage. Naval Ravikant talks about this in his book, The Almanac of Naval. Michael Jorgensen's book. He talks about, or Eric's book, Eric Jorgensen. He talks about the fact that I get leverage, operational leverage, by bringing folks in, enrolling people into my business who have more experience than I have, because I can't do it all by myself, right? And again, whether I'm doing that as a executive or whether I'm doing that as an entrepreneur, that is how I leverage my business to grow bigger. I will use myself as an example. When I started my last business, or even this business with Joe and my team here, this is about leveraging talent, right? And influencing great people to join our firm. And we did the same thing when I was at my last business at TMS. We were a small business. There was the 30 of us. And then we grew to 300 of us. And then we grew to 500 of us. Then we grew to 1,000 of us. And we brought in different levels of talent. We had to convince those people to do it. A former guest, my good friend, Barbara Yolis, I got her to leave a really amazing job to come join my firm and become the CMO of my firm. It's the person that started the dollar value menu for McDonald's. She had a ton of influence in the world of advertising. What happened with that? She brought her husband along to do our brand architecture. Bill Ludwig's a genius. And he completely rebranded us. And he was the genius that came as part of the package and the influence she brought. And so I learned very quickly, I'm like, oh, this is around influencing those around you to come be a part of something greater than themselves, which is what I did with Barbara. We're great friends to this day. And she actually started Ludwig Plus, which is her agency out of TMS. I influenced her to become an entrepreneur. So influence cuts both ways, by the way. We learn from each other. And so I learned very quickly that if I can influence those around me that have skills, knowledge, expertise that I don't have, or a power that I don't have, if I can influence in them, if I can get them to trust me, from that, I can create bigger outcomes. But in order to do that, I may have to give up power, right? I could not have micromanaged, our marketing agency when Barbara came over, or else she wouldn't have came over. And she even said that was part of the deal. She's like, look, I need to control the agency, or else, I want to build an agency inside of TMS. I'm not going to do it unless I get X, Y, and Z. So I had to give power up to do that. And I was fine with it. I was like, great, if that's what it takes for you to come over and build what you need to build so I could have that influence, great, let's do it. But it cuts the other way. Let's say you're not in a position. I was CEO of that company. Let's say you're not in a position of power. Let's say you report to someone and you want to get them to do what you want. It's not always the loudest voice in the room. A lot of times it's around earning that right for influence. And so Warren and I were talking about that. Like, look, you might have a seat at the table, right, in your business, but have you earned the right to influence the team? And so that comes down to, like, what are you doing to prove your worth? What are you doing to prove that you are an expert? What are you doing to prove that you have like a consistency about you or leadership skills around you? And there's a guest that we interviewed this week, Jason Redman, and he and I were talking about this. It's one of his 3 rules of success, which he says, what are you doing to be a leader to yourself? Because one of the number one things you need to do to be successful is lead yourself first. And if you lead yourself first, good things will follow. And once the good things follow, then you have earned the right to influence those around you. And I think a lot of times, when I thought about this, even in my own life, being younger, more egotistical, I was like, oh, I deserve to be here. And I've told this to many people that I don't really have imposter syndrome. And that could come at a detriment because it's like, oh, I automatically assume that I have the right to influence. And I have a ton of influence strengths if I look at my strength finder. So it's something that comes naturally to me. But if you take a step back and go, have I earned the right to influence? And then what do I need to do to earn that right to influence? And that's an important factor because a lot of times people that are maybe more experienced or more powerful, let's say I'm trying to get someone at a high level government position to take me seriously. Have I earned the right to influence them? And I'm not telling you to not try. As our former guest Wayne Hoffman says, yes lives in a world of no's. But one of the biggest ways to get there is to bring your competency to the table and the value you bring to the table, and show those around you that you have earned the right to influence. And with that, they will want to be a part of something greater than themselves and help you build that too. And I found that to be really fascinating, that it becomes a choice. Do I want to have the power or do I want to have the influence? And if I want to have the influence, it's around creating that bigger impact. In order to do that, I need to get those around me to trust and to believe that I've earned the right to influence them. So it's a concept that kind of blew my mind. And I was like, oh man, I got to do a podcast on this. And I wanted to share that with you all. So I just wanted to throw that out in the world. Hope you all appreciate it. Until next time, peace out. We love you. Take care. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.